Let me ask you a question. Do you think learning Korean grammar is the key to speaking Korean fluently? Many Korean learners believe that. So they start with grammar, particles, verb conjugations, sentence structures. They study for months, sometimes even for years. But when they try to speak Korean, they suddenly freeze. They know the rules, but the sentence doesn't come out. Why does this happen? Because before speaking, their brain starts checking everything. Is this particle correct? Is this grammar right? Is this sentence natural? And while they are thinking about grammar, the moment to speak is already gone. Now here's something interesting. Did Korean children study grammar before they started speaking? Of course not. They spoke first. Grammar came much later. But when people learn Korean as a foreign language, they often the exact opposite. They spend most of their time studying grammar, but very little time learning how sentences actually work. And that's why many Korean learners feel stuck. They know Korean grammar, but they can't speak Korean. So the real question is this. If grammar is not the key, what actually makes someone fluent in Korean? The answer is simpler than most people think. Fluent speakers don't build sentences one grammar rule at a time. They use sentence patterns. Think about how children learn language. They hear sentences again and again. For example, I want you to help me. I want you to see this. I want you to apologize. After hearing these sentences many times, their brain starts noticing something. There is a pattern. I want you to plus verb. They didn't study the grammar rule, but they understand how it works. So they start using it. I want you to come with me. I want you to be careful. I want you to listen. This is how language naturally works. First, you hear patterns. Then your brain recognizes the pattern. And finally, you start using the pattern. The same idea works for Korean. For example, imagine you run this pattern. Noun plus 어때요, which means how about. Now suddenly you can make many sentences. 피자 어때요? How about pizza? 영화 어때요? How about a movie? 커피 어때요? How about coffee? You didn't study a complicated grammar rule. You just learned the pattern. And by changing one word, you can create many natural sentences. This is why learning sentence patterns is so powerful. Instead of building sentences word by word, you start speaking with ready-made structures. And that makes speaking Korean much faster and much easier. So instead of focusing only on grammar, a smarter way to learn Korean is this. Learn useful sentence patterns, practice them, and start using them right away. Now sentence patterns sounds like a great solution, and they really are. But there is still one problem. Learning patterns naturally takes a lot of time. Think about how we learned our native languages. We heard the sounds of sentences every single day, at home, at school, from friends, from TV. Our brain collected a huge amount of language data, and from the data, our brain slowly discovered patterns. But here's the problem for Korean learners. We are not surrounded by Korean 24 hours a day. Most learners study Korean maybe 1 or 2 hours a day, sometimes even less. So, if you wait for patterns to appear naturally, it can take a very long time, sometimes years. And during the time, many learners start feeling frustrated. They feel like they understand Korean, but they still can't speak comfortably. They know words, they know grammar, but the sentence still doesn't come out quickly. And this is the point where many Korean learners give up. So the real challenge is not whether patterns work. The real challenge is this. How can we learn sentence patterns much faster? That's the key question. And fortunately, there is a way to do exactly that. So how can we learn sentence patterns faster? The answer is actually very simple. Instead of waiting to discover patterns naturally, start by learning the patterns directly. Think about the natural language learning process again. Normally, it looks like this. First, you hear a lot of sentences. Then your brain finds patterns. And finally, you start using them. But this process takes years. You can shorten the process. Instead of starting with thousands of random sentences, we start with the patterns themselves. For example, imagine you run this Korean pattern, noun plus 어때요, which means how about. Now you can immediately make many sentences. 피자 어때요? How about pizza? 영화 어때요? How about a movie? copy 어때요? How about copy? Just by changing one word, you can create many natural Korean sentences. Now imagine learning hundreds of patterns like this. Suddenly something interesting happens. You stop building sentences slowly, word by word. Your brain starts using ready-made sentence structures. Speaking becomes faster, conversations become smoother, and Korean starts feeling more natural. That's why many language experts say learning useful phrases and sentence patterns is one of the most effective ways to learn a language. Because language is not just grammar, language is patterns. And when you learn enough patterns, speaking Korean stops feeling impossible. It starts feeling natural, and that's the moment when real fluency begins. So remember this. Fluency doesn't come from studying grammar. It comes from learning and using sentence patterns. Learn the patterns, use them again and again, and speaking Korean will become much easier. Thank you for watching, and I see you in the next video.